What was also interesting is he was saying AI or these digital systems have actually achieved immortality. And he was saying for him, immortality is just decoupling the software and the hardware. So let's say the server breaks and OpenAI's server breaks. Well, it's not a big deal because they could just take the software and run it on a different computer. And so AI doesn't actually have to worry about dying. Chris, I just realized there's war in your name. Like,
indeed, yeah.
maybe
War
your
knock.
ancestors were warriors or something.
I know. It could be. War is knocking too. It's a bit ominous if you kind of
Yeah, pretty intense.
break it down. What about Cordova? What is that?
It's from Cordoba, Spain. So it
okay.
started with a B, but probably somewhere in my ancestry because the B and the V in Spanish sound very similar. And so I think they swapped. Actually, I think V is the older spelling. But other than that, I don't know.
The OG.
Cool. Should we jump into some cool news?
Let's do it.
Okay, so I think there's it's just amazing every week how many releases there are. And I thought this one was cool. And the headline says it all. Anthropic, they released a model with 100K context windows. So that's a big deal in my mind. I haven't tried it. I will try it soon. So I don't have a lot to say about it. But what was interesting to add some context is that the average person can read 100,000 tokens of text in 5 hours. And so they put the whole text of Great Gatsby in there, which is only 72% of the token limit, and it took 22 seconds. So I haven't validated this, so I can't say if this is cherry picked or what, but it just shows where we're going. And I don't know how good this model is, but I love that there's a 100K context window because a lot of our time is spent in doing clever things and multiple prompts, and you can just put a massive context window in there. That's amazing. And I hope this kind of makes OpenAI and Google hurry up.
Yeah, I mean, even in my own experience working with GPT-4 through the Chat-GPT interface, and I don't know about how it is with the playground, but this is the limitation oftentimes, where you want to work with a larger text and it just starts kind of losing its mind, or you're eating into its ability to reply. So this is pretty massive.
Exactly. It's like, why is this important? Well, current AI is just very forgetful. You use it and then it just forgets what you were talking about earlier, and it's a bit annoying. Or it requires a massive technical leap, which we've done, to make it not be forgetful. And so if it just in the foundation model was just not forgetful, it's a big deal.
Totally.
So the interesting, maybe we should have went over this first, but I was already blown away by them releasing the 65,000 token context window. And so I was like, oh man, this is awesome. So 2 kind of releases in 1 week. And the great thing is this is licensed for commercial use. So a lot of these great open source models like Llama, you can't use commercially, which is a bummer. And
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, they released some story writers, one of the instruct models, the chat model. Okay, so why do they have these base models? So the base model is just you predict the next token, and that makes the AI understand about humanity and creates the power of what we all know. But these base models are almost unusable. Like GPT-3 was around and it didn't kind of take the world by storm because it was this like autistic alien or something that didn't know how to, it was smart, but it couldn't communicate its intelligence and didn't know what humans wanted. And so then they did the instruction fine tune, and that was a huge leap. It made it actually usable. And then they did the reinforcement learning with human feedback, which just means they had a bunch of humans say, that was bad, this is good, this is what I wanted, this is how I want to interact. And now ChatGPT is very polite. It says, oh, I'm sorry. and so this is basically the same as this, except it can communicate with us. It understands what we want. And so they released all these so you can use these as a starting point. So open source is killing it. We talked about last time how there was an engineer inside Google who said, hey, we don't have an advantage. And this is why. This is why right in front of our face.
Can you speak at all to the challenge that is expanding the context window?
Yeah, so the problem, so it's a very technical problem. So I'm going to just get a bit technical for a second. So what's powering all this innovation is something called a transformer network, a transformer neural network. And so the interesting thing is this neural network architecture is basically the same since the 1950s when we had perceptrons. It's not exactly the same, but it's basically the same. Like it looks like the same species. And so all the innovations have been around scaling this. And the latest scaling, which actually Google came out with, by the way, and it's really nice they shared it because they could have kept that a secret and probably dominated much better. But so really nice of them. Maybe someone would have figured it out. So we have transformers, and transformers have this what's called a self-attention layer. And it's the self-attention, the way to think about it is it looks at a bunch of words beforehand and figures out, so for this word, if it says, I jumped over the whatever, it says what's important for each of these. So not everything's important when you're reading things, but maybe if you have a pronoun like he, then all of a sudden the noun Chris becomes important. And so it basically looks at what's important. The problem is that doesn't scale linearly. It scales quadratically. And so if I double the number of tokens, I have to quadruple, just to simplify, the amount of memory and compute I need. And so it's really hard to scale the context window. And so there's been some interesting research papers that have come out where you can scale it linearly, which makes it possible to have really big context windows.
Very interesting. So it's sort of like there is no pre-existing limitation necessarily of the model itself. It's just our ability to efficiently increase the input without it just becoming something that, we can't have 100 million people logging in to run these massive context windows. Gotcha. Exactly.
So there's really not a theoretical limitation, as you said. It just, you've seen how slow GPT-4 is compared to GPT-3. And one reason is because if you're using the 8K or the 32K context window, well, it just requires a lot more memory.
Right. Makes sense. So yeah, this is cool. This is kind of like Moore's law of AI, kind of.
So, well, yeah, it's not necessarily Moore's law, but yeah, it allows you to, it's just another step in scaling, making it more efficient to run something. But I do think this is in line with that, right? Because this is kind of human innovation in line with this kind of AI Moore's law. So yeah, I think I agree. So this was a cool interview. Go watch this. And I would love to, well, I guess taking a step back, there was a girl, I forgot her name, but she left a really interesting comment. And I realized how cool it is to kind of, we're talking over space and time, but through these comments or however you send email, it was actually interesting to hear people's opinion. I especially like when people disagree, because then it's like, oh, either I made a mistake or you made it. So it's super interesting. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in that, especially this interview. And it's a long interview. Well, I usually listen to really long things anyways. I really hate short content.
Same.
But what was interesting here, I'll just kind of pull out a few things I found interesting, is Geoff Hinton, he totally changed his mind. So he was saying how he evaluated whether something was intelligent is he would see if the AI can explain why a joke was funny. That was kind of one of his heuristics to see if something was intelligent. And it's actually not a bad heuristic, I think. Like if you've ever tried to learn a different language, or you have a friend or someone who English is not their first language, they can speak very well, but they still may not get the humor. Humor's one of the kind of last thing, or sometimes kids can speak well, but they don't get. So I think humor is one of the last things you pick up when you're learning a language or you're evolving your brain. So I think it's interesting. And so what scared him is PaLM could explain why a joke was funny. And he always thought that the goal was to figure out how the brain does its computation. And that's probably the best algorithm. And what we're doing now with how we train AIs is called stochastic gradient descent. It's basically just kind of calculus chain rule. And it reminds me of the analogy of, okay, you can do flight like a bird, right? Like, but that's not the only way you can fly. You can fly like an airplane. So birds use evolution and biology, but we can also fly through engineering, and they look very different, but they accomplish flight. And so the analogy is you could build something intelligent with the brain. It's an existence proof, but you can also engineer it with math and calculus and engineering. And before he thought it was actually better the way our brain does it, and maybe a way people thought it's probably better the way a bird flies, but he changed his mind, and that was very interesting. And he gives a quick justification. So he says the big thing is, so we have about 100 trillion neurons, or weights you can call it, and these GPT systems, they have about 1 trillion neurons. But the thing is, they have about 1,000 times more knowledge, concepts, and facts than we do. So the way we're training these digital neural networks with backpropagation seems to be much more efficient. And what the interesting thing is if we need to, like, let's say I want to train your neural network based on something I know, we could communicate, I don't know, with like hundreds of bits per second or something. I don't know what language can communicate, but these digital AI, they have a bandwidth of trillions of bits. It's amazing. Like any AI can learn and then instantly essentially give its brain to all the other AI, And so they can all learn in parallel much better than us. Yeah. So anyways, he was saying, and I think that's why he quit Google, because he realized that. And then he was like,
Yeah.
shit, like, oh my God, this is really intense. And I need to kind of use my position as an influencer to flag this. And then he just talks about some stuff about what is actually worrying him about AI. Like he talks about bad actors, like military robots, alignment, which is like we have goals, like we want to survive, we want to mate. AI doesn't necessarily have goals, but we can make them have goals. Or maybe we give them a goal and then they have some sub goal that's like, okay, in order to accomplish this, I need to wipe out humans. Yeah. So anyways, there was a few other points where he was like, actually bias in AI is easier to fix than bias in humans. And he was talking about immortality, and like there's a bunch of stuff in there that's really worth checking out. So anyways.
Yeah, I mean, the way you framed the way he got to change his mind is very interesting. It's a little bit scary because the way I think about it, it's like you're building a better brain, potentially like a much better brain that's, it's the same in that it's intelligent, but it's operating at in a capacity that's sort of beyond what we could really comprehend. And it's kind of counter to my other comment, which is he talks in here also about how we shouldn't forget about the potential good of this technology. And I think he uses the example of self-driving cars. And, the media will, even in this example with him, the media focuses a lot on the doom and gloom aspect, that it's coming for us, you're going to lose your job, it's going to kill all of the humanity, something like this. And it's similar to his analogy with the self-driving car. We always focus on the stories where something went wrong, but human drivers, things go wrong every day, a lot. And so if you can actually solve this problem where it's, significantly safer than human drivers with automated AI powered cars, well, it's a net good for us, right? It can get lost.
I agree. It's a really good point. I was just driving my Tesla in self-driving mode, and like literally there was two cars that went in my lane. One car, this lady was texting and like went, and another guy, he was like in this like Dodge truck and he had both hands off the wheel, and it wasn't self-driving.
Oh my
and it was just, So anyways, great analogy. And and it's easier to kind of fix those biases in the self-driving software than to teach every human to not like go on Twitter or Instagram or something.
Or don't be tired,
Yeah. What was also interesting is he was saying AI or these digital systems have actually achieved immortality. And he was saying for him, immortality is just decoupling the software and the hardware. So let's say the server breaks in OpenAI's server breaks. Well, it's not a big deal because they could just take the software and run it on a different computer. And so AI doesn't actually have to worry about dying. Maybe it's less stressed because for us, the hardware and software are the same. And so if our hardware, like our software dies right now and we die. And so he was just saying maybe AI is just not as stressed because like, whatever, man, like I'm going to live. And whereas we're like, okay, if our hardware gets corrupted, then we're screwed. And he was also having some things like that. We have an audio in, audio out communication. I can hear you and I can speak to you. And he was saying things like, it would be great if we had video in, but also video out. Because anytime we say something, there's probably an image in our head. And so if I could just make a video for you, it would save a lot of time. And then it made me think, it made me think about that, because then Peter was like, oh yeah, you could have this video on top of your car. And then they're like, maybe that's not a good idea because that would just make everyone mad because you'd be like creating these images of flipping you off or like
some like a speaker to project your consciousness or something.
Yeah,
it's
so
very interesting.
Go watch that. Tell me what you guys think. We can have a discussion about it. Super interesting stuff. Moving on. So this transformer agent is interesting. So agents are all the rage these days. There's a collab too that you can use if you want to play with that. But you can read this. It provides a natural language API on top of transformers, and it can interpret natural language, use tools. So it's really cool. It says, caption the following image. A beaver is swimming in the water. Read the following text out loud. And then it plays it. You probably can't hear that, but it just said
I can.
Oh, you can hear it. Yeah.
Water.
And then you can say, in the following document, where will the TRF scientific advisor, so you can search that. So anyways, I thought that was really cool. And we actually built something similar internally that does something like this. It's actually even more powerful, but I thought this was really cool.
And so the key here is that you're kind of able to use natural language to string together these different tools that previously would have required you quite a bit of time and perhaps more technical knowledge to make it work. Whereas with this, it's a lot more intuitive.
Exactly. So I think why this is important to me is there's three things actually. But one is you can use natural language to say what you want. So caption the following image. Whereas before you'd have to fine tune a neural network that only did captioning. It was a lot of work. You needed a lot of expertise in infrastructure engineering, algorithms. So now it takes all that and just makes it a natural language thing. The second thing is instead of just saying caption the following image and then it, like it is on Chat-GPT, it actually integrates different machine learning models and tools together. So it integrates things seamlessly. So it's like a glue that glues things together. And I got access a few days ago to the GPT plugins, and they're really cool. The third one's a more technical point, which I'll skip, but those are the big
and so
things.
it's you saying caption the following image, and based off of that, it then goes and finds you a model that can help you with captioning.
Exactly,
that works with
because you have caption and you have image. There's some metadata in an image captioning model, and the AI is smart enough to pull the name and description and do that. And then this doesn't do that, but you could even iterate, which is another cool thing.
Like these are obviously fairly simplistic examples, and I'm sure this could get, I don't want to put you on the spot and be like, lay one out for us, but I think it could probably get pretty like robust.
Yeah, I mean, it can have multi-step goals. And so you could say caption or find an image of a beaver and caption it. So then it can go on Google, find an image of a beaver and then caption it and then say, send that to my mom or something. And then it goes in your messaging app or so.
Cool. Really cool.
All right. So some bigger news. I don't know if you saw Google I/O. I watched 5-minute summary, but they're trying to keep up with OpenAI. So they released a new version of Bard and they're integrating that into their search. And there was a research paper, I read it, but they don't really say anything useful. They talk, actually, what was interesting about that research paper, and we'll link it below, is they were talking a bit about bias and stuff, but much smaller than OpenAI. I would expect, from what I'm seeing, OpenAI actually seems like the much more responsible company here. Just from reading the GPT-4 technical document, a lot was about bias and safety. Only a bit in the Google one was about that. So I was surprised, and I wasn't surprised that they didn't actually say anything in there useful. Because
do you think
now
maybe they were kind of like rushed on this since they're
probably, I think so. And then they released PaLM 2. So this is kind of, you can call it a competitor to Chat-GPT. And they're hyping it here. What I would say is overall, it's still not as smart as Chat-GPT, but it is better at a few things. So it's not bad. It's not worse at everything. There are a few things that it's better at. Like for example, so you can ask it, so can you fix this code with a bug and add line by line comments in Korean? So I don't know, maybe this is a really big feature in Korea. I don't know, but I just thought that was cool. And I tried that also in ChatGPT and it didn't do it as good. So there's a few things which I think they cherry picked here, translation, and maybe they just have more access to language data.
Yeah.
And then it does some good reasoning, multi-step reasoning, but even this is still not as good as GPT-4 in the examples I tried.
Progress, nonetheless. I suppose we need other big players in the space upping their game as OpenAI's ran so far ahead. And I do know they were specifically talking up its coding abilities. So I'm sure in the coming, weeks, people will dig into that and see where we're at on that progression.
So I think that's the news for today. I don't know if you had any other things you wanted to talk about.
Well, I mean, given this landscape and how quickly it's changing, you're a CEO, you've been working in AI for 15 plus years. It's accelerating. It's certainly not totally new that the space is changing, but right now it is accelerating at hyperspeed, let's say. How do you set goals, first off, with amid all of this change? And how do you decide whether or not to change them based off of kind of all of these new inputs as they come to you?
Yeah, so that's a good question, actually. So yeah, I think, how do you set goals? Well, the good thing is that this technology doesn't change the fundamentals. So when the printing press came out, no one could imagine what books were published. It was just the priests writing the Bible, right? And then after that, people were writing about everything, like how to make airplanes, and that led to a bunch. So there was just a Cambrian explosion of bandwidth of communication between humans, but it didn't change everything, right? And the same with this. And there was a nice Jeff Bezos quote, and Warren Buffett often says things like this of like, well, does it change that people want to eat chocolate and stuff? He's always like folksy and focused on that. But Jeff Bezos had a quote where he often focuses, instead of seeing what's going to change in the future, he asks himself what's not going to change in the future. And one of those things is like, is there going to be a change where people want to pay more money for something and get a lower quality? Well, probably not. Probably people always want to pay less for higher quality. So that's not going to change. And I think the business fundamentals are not going to change. So when you have a business and you're setting your goals, you need a strategic advantage and you need a moat. So you need network effect, or you need an embedding advantage, which is, so network effects are like Facebook. Facebook is useless if you're the only one on Facebook, or a phone network is useless. And so phone networks, their usefulness increases by n squared, where n's the number of users. They call it Metcalfe's law. So what happens is network effects is the more people get on some network, the more valuable it is. And so that's a strategic advantage. You have embedding. So embeddings like Oracle or IBM, even if there's a better database or something, like they're not going to pull out Oracle. It just, you have an advantage because you're just so deeply embedded in all these companies. And that's advantage. You have a brand advantage like Apple. Just because they're Apple, you'll buy them. They have an advantage. And then you have things like economies of scale. So Amazon has, like, if you have a fixed cost in your business, when you're at a low scale, that fixed cost is a high percentage of your cost. But as you grow, the fixed cost becomes a lower percentage of your cost. And so that gives you an advantage you can charge a much lower price because you can keep higher margins at the same price. And so how I set goals is that doesn't change. Like, I'm like, okay, our business needs to have high margins. We need to grow. We need to make sure we have a strategic advantage. And so with all this AI stuff coming out, I think a lot of it's soon going to become commoditized and it's going to become table stakes. And so a lot of our strategy is just thinking about, okay, what actually, back to the basics, is going to give us a strategic advantage and what is just commodities. And it's easy to get caught up in all this flashy new demos and stuff, but it's just about going back to the basics. But day to day, there's a big change. I need to more than ever make sure my morning routines on point. So I usually wake up at 4, sometimes 4:30, sometimes 5. I don't like to use alarms, and then I will meditate to make sure that I'm mentally healthy, because it's a crazy world, and I think emotional, mental health is going to be more important than ever. I don't think we were designed to handle a world where things change multiple times a week, sometimes multiple times a day. And then in terms of goals, I write down all my goals. So I have 10-year goals, 5-year goals, yearly goals, quarterly goals, and then I have weekly goals and daily goals. It sounds kind of crazy now that I'm saying it out loud. But what I will do is I'll take one long-term goal, one medium-term goal, and one short-term goal, and I will visualize it as if I've already achieved it. So I'll be like, yes, oh my gosh. And I will really celebrate it. And what's interesting is your brain gets so much certainty about your goal. And then you're like, wait, how did I do that? And you kind of think in the past how you did that, even though that's the future. And it's such a powerful technique. I've always been surprised how basically anytime I've done that, it's come true. Like one of my goals is I wanted to go to MIT, and I would actually visualize my shower in my dorm. Like it was this like really ugly gray shower, like this industrial gray shower. And when I went to MIT and they showed me my dorm, I literally saw the shower that I visualized for so long, and I literally started crying. Like I literally was so overwhelmed. Like even just thinking about it now, it was just like, and I've had this over and over again. And I don't really believe in magic or something, but it's the closest I've come to some kind of magical thing. There's probably just like you train your limbic system and your reticular activation system to find opportunities. But in the end, it feels like magic. And so I do that.
Is it kind of like manifesting something in a sense?
Yeah, there's like a bunch of woo-woo, wah-wah stuff like The Secret, and I don't know if I believe in, but just empirically, it's powerful. And so I make an effort to do that every day. And then I just read an insane amount, and I don't have TVs, or I think as a kid, I watched so much, you don't even believe how much TV I watched as a kid. And so I think I just got that out of my system but anyways, those are some of the things that are more important.
If you get up at 4:30, what time do you go to bed?
Usually I try to get to bed at 10.
10.
Sometimes not always successful. Yeah.
Or do you find it difficult rather to balance the present moment with thinking about the future and goals? And two-part question, do you use any tools to help you with tracking these goals and defining them?
The goals, yeah. So, well, I use Notion, and so I have a work journal, and so it's just this super long Notion document that it's like today, tomorrow, and I just track what I'm doing day to day, and I have this running list of things. It's kind of like a memory state at top. I just have this queue, and then each day, and then I just document my entire journey. And then for my quarterly goals and yearly goals, I also have a Notion document, and I break the goals into categories. So there's like financial goals, there's relationship goals, there's health goals, and then there's like growth goals and contribution goals. Like, what do I want to contribute to the world? And I try to make them smart, as we all heard 1,000 times, and actionable and time bound, like all those things. And then what I do each quarter is I figure out what drained my energy. Like, I look back and I'm like, what things did I do that was energy draining? And what things did I do that was just totally building up my energy? And I try to, as much as I can, eliminate these energy draining things, or at least I'm aware of what's energy draining, and I will cut it out of my life. I'm pretty ruthless in cutting things out of my life that are energy draining to me.
Makes perfect sense. And it's good to know, right? Because sometimes you can get caught up in things and the seeming importance of it blinds you to the reality of the effect it's having on your life. Awesome, man. I think we're about at our time, our loose time, if
Cool.
there's nothing else.
All right, Chris, good chat. I hope you have a good day and talk to you soon.
You too, Brad. Bye.
All right, bye.